Welcome to the SwimSwam Breakdown. As always, I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Today, coming to you from Geneva, Ohio, home of Practice and Pancakes sponsor Spire Institute. More on that in a couple weeks. As always, we're joined by SwimSwam Editor-in-Chief Braden Keith from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and SwimSwam contributor Michael Heyman from Naperville, Illinois.
It's like the Westmont Pro Swim. We're just going to go ahead and rebrand the entire suburban area of Chicago.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. You're in the state of Illinois. That's all our viewers need to know. We've got a quick Newsweek rundown, and then we are talking world champ trials. Let's start with head coaching changes. First off, Chris Lindauer, who was the associate head coach at University of Louisville, has been announced as the head coach of Notre Dame. Braden, I think you saw this one coming before everyone else. What do you think of this hire?
Yeah, this was kind of one that I think people have known about for a while. Whether or not it was announced, it's kind of been common knowledge within the community for maybe a week or two. But I think it's a good hire. He's been there for the entire of the Arthur Albiero sort of build up at Louisville, and Louisville, thanks to their consistent drops at NCAAs, which are basically as good as anybody in the country, is kind of a hot-handed program. So I think the next question is, who's he going to take with him from the Louisville staff, and who is Louisville going to hire to replace him? Arthur Albiero was making calls vetting Jeremy Kipp, the former USC coach, to be his new associate head coach. Sort of sounds like that's fallen through. But if Louisville loses two coaches out of this, who they replace them with could be a big determining factor in the future of that program too. So,
yeah, I mean, like Braden said, this has kind of been, at least on the inside, seemed to have been known for a little while that this was coming. To me, I think it's moving within the conference. He obviously knows the ACC as well as any of their probably potential candidates, have or do. The thing that's a little bit interesting to me is Notre Dame and Louisville are very different universities, even though they compete in the same conference. Notre Dame being a private, religiously based school with really, really elite academics. Louisville, being a public school.
Careful, Michael.
It's in a super urban area, and Notre Dame is in a very rural area. Like they could not be two completely, like they couldn't be more different on just about every level. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing for him to figure out is what pieces is he bringing with him from the Albiero model that's worked really well in Louisville, and what things is he going to have to do differently to be successful in South Bend, Indiana versus Louisville, Kentucky.
They've got Portillo's in South Bend, Indiana, so he's got that going.
And then another ACC hire, Chase Kreitler, who was the Cal assistant. I guess kind of technically still was, but stepped away as his wife had a child, and David Marsh took over for taper time in NCAAs and conference championships. He's not returning to Cal. He is going to be the new head coach of Pitt. So lots of changes within this conference. Chase has been coaching for a long time. I didn't realize how extensive his resume was. Braden, thoughts on Chase going down to Pitt?
Does this mean David Marsh is going to be the new full-time assistant at Cal?
I mean, that's what I thought should happen.
I am ready for that news to drop. Chase has been coaching men's teams for a little while, but he's coached women before, so he's got that background. I think Pitt is another school with potential. They don't have quite sort of the football foundation of a place like Notre Dame, but they've got a great facility and cool urban campus. I think that there's some potential there. I think they can certainly be better than 11th in the ACC. I think Chase is a nice guy. I think he'll have a pretty easy time recruiting, both with his background and his personality. So I think Pitt's going to get better quick. And how that sustains, I don't know. He's been working under some of the best coaches that we've ever seen in college swimming. So now he's got to stand on his own 2 feet, and we'll find out a lot about what he learned from those guys and what he knows. But at a minimum for Pitt, it seems like a change from some of the conflict they had under John Hargis. It doesn't seem like he's going to be one of these guys that's going to have tons of accusations of abuse by his athletes and verbal abuse and emotional abuse and all this stuff that's become sort of the norm, it feels like. So at least, it feels like a stable foundation for them to move forward.
Yeah, I think the recruiting piece is the one that is most interesting to me, is that the state of Pennsylvania is a really, really strong, fertile recruiting ground that, to be honest, like doesn't have a major player in the state, right? In terms of he's not competing with another, University of Virginia, University of Florida, University of Texas, like a big powerhouse program in the state.
UPenn isn't a big powerhouse program, Michael Haney?
UPenn graduate is doing great. University of Pennsylvania, everybody look out for it in Philadelphia, but certainly on the western half of the state. We'll leave it at that. If he can more or less kind of put a fence, so to speak, around the state of Pennsylvania and keep a lot of the best kids in Pennsylvania going to Pittsburgh, that's the biggest piece. Is he has to get national level talent through the door in Pittsburgh to compete with the UVAs, the NC States, the Louisvilles, in what is, in my opinion, quickly becoming one of the strong, if not the strongest conference in college swimming.
I think there's two angles kind of offbeat angles worth discussing here. Number one, as you alluded to, Penn State hasn't been great, and they have a terrible facility. If Pitt gets good, does that shorten the leash at Penn State? And number two, let's fast forward 5 years. Which team is placing higher at ACCs, Notre Dame or Pitt?
To me, I'm going with Pitt because of a point that Michael brought up earlier. You take Notre Dame, which is in a pretty rural area. It's a small town. It has a little more of a university foundation and culture and tradition. But then you have Louisville, where Lindauer came from. That's like a pretty urban area. But then you have Pittsburgh, which is like very urban, big city. I've never been there. I've heard great things about it. Everyone who I've known who's ever been is like, this is like actually a really cool city. So I think you combine that with the recruiting of Chase and the experience of Chase. And I think he could really do some good things there with a recruiting pool like the East Coast and Pennsylvania.
It's kind of tricky, right? Because I think if you put Chase at Notre Dame and you put Chris at Pitt, and I'm not saying that Chase is a better coach than Chris. I don't know if we know the answer to that yet. But Chase certainly has more name recognition. For whatever reason, the Louisville assistants, and I'm sure they're all sitting in their offices watching this, screaming about how we don't talk about Louisville enough. But they don't have a lot of name recognition. And Chase Kreitler, for an assistant coach, is fairly well known. So if you put Chase with the resources of Notre Dame and sort of the national brand of Notre Dame, I think the clear answer is Notre Dame in a sort of compressed timeline like that. But I like Pittsburgh. I'm one of these people who like Pittsburgh, but I'm trying to put myself in the mind of a 17-year-old high school student, and specifically the parents of a 17-year-old high school student. And they're both good academic schools, right? They're both very good academic schools, but there are a lot of people who view Notre Dame like a USC, like one of these real top tier private schools. And there's a kind of a badge of honor of sending your kids to a Notre Dame. And I think that's a big leg up for Chris. I don't know why that hasn't worked for Notre Dame yet. I don't know what's going on there, obviously there was a problem with the last coaches for them to leave in the middle of a season. But if Chris is a good coach and a good guy, Notre Dame should be a top 15 or 10 team consistently, because that's what Notre Dame does.
And it feels to me like Notre Dame feels like it's been a potential sleeping giant for a really, really long time. The resources of the athletic department, with Notre Dame being an independent football school, they financially get way more resources than a lot of teams get just from being in a Power 5 conference. As you mentioned, the facilities are pretty comparable, and the academic piece, at least of the reputation of the school outside of the region, is unbelievable at Notre Dame. And it feels to me that, as you said, it's a place that you should be able to get to a consistent top 10 NCAA program. And for whatever reason, it hasn't happened yet. But for that reason alone, I feel like it's a natural, the brand recognition is going to get his foot in the door with a conversation with everybody in the country. Whereas I'm not sure that the brand recognition of Pitt is going to allow Chase to get his foot in the door with everybody in the country.
Well, and Notre Dame is an international brand, right? Like a lot of European kids are like, oh, I don't care. All these colleges are the same to me. I want to go to the one that's going to get me to the Olympics. European kids will know Notre Dame. Kids in California want to go to Notre Dame. Locally, he's got the recruiting hotbed in Indiana, the recruiting hotbed in Chicago, which is the biggest LSC in the country. And until Notre Dame's recent sort of signs of life has been just sort of a free for all for the rest of the Big Ten to pick over. So, I think this is bad news for the Big Ten, because if Notre Dame starts recruiting Chicago well, then that's bad for a Big Ten, especially on the men's side. That's is a little hobbled at the moment. So I think my final answer is probably Notre Dame, but that maybe has less to do with the quality of the coaches than the circumstance.
Well, and to further that point, even though I said Pitt, like Notre Dame was almost there, right? They had Zach Yaden, and then they had Jack Hoagland, who was like Zach Yaden Jr., right?
ACC Swimmer of the Year.
And they were like building there, and you could see the building blocks behind them, their second tier teammates, like them pulling them up. So like they were almost there, and then you kind of had this coaching team collapse, and it all kind of fell apart. But it's certainly in recent past, they've been right there. And so it seems like, with the right leadership, they could probably do it again pretty quickly. All right, enough about college. Let's talk about U.S.
College season's over.
Trials. College season's over, and it's time for some sink or swim. U.S. World Trials is upon us. It starts tomorrow, and we are sink or swimming our top storylines to watch for in Greensboro. First off, Shaine Casas just missed the Olympic team last year. He has looked pretty solid this year at some of the pro swims. I even got to see one of his taper practices the other day. He was talking smack to David Johnston. We might see a 400 free /400 IM showdown in Irvine at Nationals later this summer. My fingers are crossed for that. Do we see Shaine bouncing back and making the world's team this year?
I'm going to swim it on any individual event. I can come up with a reason not to, but with how well he swam at short course worlds, and then going to Texas and sort of that new training environment, hopefully got him refocused and reengaged. We have to remember he was arrested for public intoxication just a few weeks before the Olympic trials. And, I would expect that at least in his first few months at a new program, that kind of thing wouldn't be happening. So on the totality of his opportunities, he's one of 3 guys in the 100 back. He's one of a couple of guys in the 200 back. He's got a shot in the 100 fly, depending on how Michael Andrew looks. We'll see if he swims the 200 IM, but it seems to me like he's got as good a shot of anybody there. So just the number of opportunities he has, I'm going to swim him making the team. Don't ask me which race. I don't want to say.
Yeah, I agree that I'll swim this as well. And it was for the exact same reason. I think there's as likely a chance that he qualifies in 3 or 4 individual events as he misses the team. Like, he has so many different opportunities to make the team in the backstrokes and the 100 fly. The 156 200 IM in San Antonio is, for a midseason race is a huge swim. There are just too many opportunities for him to make the team. He's got to hit at least one of them. And my gut tells me there's going to be more than one.
Ooh, which ones?
I'm going to go with the 200 IM and the 100 back.
I'm going to go 100 back, 100 fly. I think he pips MA for the 100 fly.
I'm one-upping you guys. I'm going 1 back, 2 back, 1 fly. I think he has a monster meet. We've seen him do it before, not long course, granted, but we've seen him do a short course. We've seen him doing short course meters. He won the won the 100 back in Abu Dhabi in December. I think he makes the team in 3 events, but we'll soon find out. Next up, this is a weird year, right? We never have trials in April. It feels like we're Canada or Australia or any of the several countries that had it, right? Because of the world champs that are moved up in June. It's a quick turnaround for the college swimmers. Do we think this is going to benefit the college swimmers? And do we think they can handle this well and make the team? So sink or swim, this will benefit collegiate swimmers coming off of NCAAs.
I'm going to sink it. I guess I kind of get it. And with the pro swims being a little bit soft, I think maybe some of the pros have the potential to be a little flat. I can see all of those arguments, but I just don't think NCAAs is such an emotional high. I think it's going to be hard to sort of recapture that as quickly as they need to for a lot of swimmers. So I'm going to sink it being a benefit.
Yeah, I'm going to sink it as well. Like, no matter what anybody says, everybody rests some amount in February at conference. Everybody goes all in for NCAAs, and then you got to go in all in again at the end of April. You're talking 3 rests in the span of 10 weeks. Like, that is not really a recipe for success, and especially in long course. And for those that make the team and have to rest again 5 weeks later, you're looking at 4 different rests over the course of 14, 15 weeks. At some point, you got to do some work to finish some races in long course. And I think that's potentially a really, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, but I think that could be a recipe for disaster at the Worlds for the college kids that do make it, is that they've been perpetually resting so much over the months leading up.
Plus finals, because all the college kids are taking or about to take finals. Yeah, I mean, if you're USA Swimming, you're almost from a national brand perspective, you might almost be rooting for some of the college kids to not show up for that reason. I wonder how many college swimmers came into this like expecting this, and we saw a few swimmers that could have been faster at NCAAs. Maybe some of them didn't go full taper for NCAAs. I know how we always talk about these taper things, but I think that's a potential this year.
That's the point I was just about to bring up, especially on the women's side, where you see a lot of the 2020 Olympians in college: Reagan, Tori, Phoebe Bacon, the other backstroker from Alabama, Ryan White, right? It's like a lot of those women. My theory is that they kind of planned on it. They did well at NCs, but none of them it seemed like they were at 100%, right? And my theory is that they were kind of planning for this. They rested for conference, they rested for NCs, but they had the base behind them, and now they're going to rest for trials. And I think they will knock it out of the park, or at least secure their spots. On the men's side, it's a little different because a lot of the guys who did really well there are not from America, and a lot of the US NCAA studs have less of a good chance making the team, or just it's a little more murky. But I think it's going to go well. I think people plan for it. And again, we'll find out soon. Men's 800 free relay. Oh man. I don't even know what's going to happen here. We have so many like wild cards. We have like Blake P's out. We have 1 or 2 others from Tokyo who are like not really in the mix, as I recall. Oh, I think we thought Drew Kibler was going to retire, but he's not. But it's just such a mixed bag. So I'll let you guys dissect it. But sink or swim, we're going to medal in Budapest. I don't know. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess Australia being shorthanded, I think we'll probably find a way to medal, because I think we'll probably find a bunch of 145s and 146s on a relay, and that's fine. I really want Caleb to take this opportunity to go for it in the 200 free. Like, if not now, then when? Let's find out how that plays out. The Olympic schedule is going to change in Paris. We don't know what
that exactly will look like yet, but we know it's going to change. So maybe that 800 free relay conflict will be alleviated for him.
I
But
like how they made that announcement and then didn't tell us what it was. Like I remember clicking on that article, be like, "Oh boy," and then we didn't know it. So
yeah, and when they do, we will write a minimum of 72 articles on the topic. So I think they'll probably medal just because of the circumstance of it, and like the U.S. has the depth where when guys are kind of looking past this meet that they can still put together a good relay, whereas other countries, if they have a top guy looking past this meet, they might be sunk. So I think we'll still medal. I don't know who's going to be on the team. Carson, maybe that'll be Carson's big breakthrough. Michael, say something interesting. I got nothing.
I have a hard time. Well, I had a hard time seeing us not medaling last summer, and we all know how that ended up, right? I have to think, to Braden's point, like there are, probably no less than a half a dozen guys that with a relay swing can go 146 mid, if not more than that. Like there's at a certain point, it just becomes a numbers game of, we're not going to have the 143 or the 144 split, but we're probably just going to have four dudes that are solid enough to find their way into a bronze. I think from the Caleb perspective, it's really up to what, his goal and what his goals and Nestie's goals are to figure out at this meet. And if the goal is to win as many medals as possible, like putting him on the mixed relays is obviously the way to go if he's, going to swim all these different events, on if we're debating whether or not we're going to medal and the goal is to win as many medals as possible, then you don't put him on a relay where we're not even sure if we're going to medal.
Okay, but what about my goals?
Bite your tongue, Michael.
I have my own set of goals for Caleb, and I think he needs to consider those too.
Just do it, Caleb. I do want to add that Russia's out, right?
Right.
So that's a fact. I feel like we will medal because of where all the other teams are at, right?
Yeah, because Russia was silver, Australia was bronze, and both of those relays. I mean, Russia's gone. Australia at best will be neutered with no Kyle Chalmers.
Brazil kind of looks shaky.
Yeah, U.S. was fourth. Italy will be there,
strong, but
then there's a huge gap after Italy to Switzerland. So yeah, I mean, now that I'm looking at it harder, it's a clear swim, but I don't think it's going to be too impressive. I'm looking at the schedule for Worlds because I'm not so worried about Caleb qualifying. It's doesn't make sense for him to swim at Worlds,
right?
And it is at the end of the session with the 50 free and the 100 fly.
Gosh.
I mean, it's just prelims and semis of the 50 free and the 100 fly. And, last year we used them on that mixed medley at the end of a triple, even when we shouldn't have, regardless of the triple. So if you're not going to be afraid to do it at the Olympics, why should you be afraid to do it at Worlds?
But
you shouldn't.
Zach Apple swim it after his 100 free semi and we on stuff? Yeah. Oh man. All right. Well,
Nestie and DeSorbo will have different opinions on that. So,
all right. Carson Foster, another guy training with the Texas Longhorns. His narrative has been for a while. He can swim really, really fast, but he hasn't necessarily done it at the right times. Will he finally qualify for a senior international team?
I think he's absolutely going to, because I think he's so much better in the 200 free now that I think he's got a chance there, and the pressure's kind of off. And if Chase doesn't swim the 400 IM, that feels like that takes a lot of pressure off there too, because it's a pretty sizable gap to the field. So I think by circumstance, he will definitely make the team. I think Carson's got like 4 race at Worlds potential, and at the risk of putting more pressure on him that we don't need to do, that's sort of the oh my God, Carson's got it figured out and he's the new Captain America level. But I think like Shaine Casas, he's got enough chances and enough races. He's not putting all his eggs in one basket. I think that will alleviate some of the pressure. He doesn't have to win races. He just has to be top 2 or top 6. And so I think he makes the team. I'm swimming it.
Yeah, I'm going to swim it as well. And as Braden said, the big variable in the 400 IM is whether or not Kalish swims it. If Kalish swims it, then that becomes a lot hairier of a field for Carson to work his way through, as opposed to if he doesn't, then it's much more open with finishing up just in the top two without Chase there. But I'm going to throw out the comparison to Carson Foster following a similar path as Andrew Seliskar, starting off as an IMer and then finding his way on international teams in the 200 free. And I think that's where Carson makes it here is maybe he qualifies individually. He certainly, I think, qualifies on the 800 free relay.
And he was 7th at trials last year, right? I mean, he just missed it. And I think he was feeling way more pressure at that meet than he probably will, or maybe just handling that pressure better this time around. And especially with the people that won't be there at trials this time, I absolutely swim it and see him making the team at the very least in that 200 free. Another exciting relay potentially for US, women's 4x1 free. So in 2016 Olympics, Australia dominated, broke the world record, won gold. Next year, USA came back when Australia didn't have a full power team and won world champs gold. 2020 Olympics, Australia dominated, broke world record, won gold. It's 2022. Okay. Team USA women 4x1 free relay. Do they win gold?
I think we can't forget about Canada. I don't know how I feel about Canada with Maggie McNeil injured. I'd probably give the US an edge. They were only 3 100ths apart at the Olympics, I think. So I'd probably give the US the edge there. I think God, Australia doesn't have to be at full strength to throw out like a 51 and 352s on that relay. That's what's kind of scary about them. And the US will be lucky to get 352s and a 53. So I think I'm going to sink the Americans swimming it, but the one thing that the US has going for it is that most of this relay is not coming off of NCAA competition. Most of the swimmers who could be on this relay, Claire Curzon, Abby Weitzel, Natalie Hins, Erica Brown, who am I not thinking of? Smoliga. Tori Husk would be the exception to that.
Gretchen and Kate,
Gretchen and Kate, if you think they're really there. And they not that I don't think they could be, but like I don't know that I see them as the difference makers here. Like I don't think they're there yet in long course, at least in the 100 free. But the US has some pieces that aren't coming off of the college season. I don't think they'll have much trouble replacing Allison Schmidt and Katie DeLoof, neither of whom are swimming at this meet and were prelim swimmers last year. So I don't think that'll be a problem, but the US can put together a really good 4. And I think they have a chance. I'm not going to say it's like out of the question, but I think Australia is deep enough that they can still win this even without Emma McEwen, Kate Campbell, and whoever else is missing.
Yeah, I'm going to sink it as well. And the piece that we haven't talked about is obviously we were bronze last summer, and the person who carried that relay to the bronze, Simone Manuel, still went 51.9 at the end of that relay, despite all of the conversation around whatever issues she had.
52.9,
excuse me. Still was the 54.0 lead off from Erica Brown was, that's not going to get it done again if you don't have that, you don't have the hammer at the end. And if I don't know that we have, multiple people that are going to go in the 52 mid to low that it's going to take to win.
So two scheduling thoughts here. Women's 400 free relays day 1 at Worlds, which means it's after the women's 100 fly semis and after the women's 200 IM semis. So that probably hurts Kate Douglas's chances of being on that relay.
And Tori and Curzan both coming off the
100 fly.
But they're young.
Yeah. If Kate's in all 3 of those, I think she's definitely out of the relay. Which is possible.
It is possible. It's just a funny thought.
Yeah. But, and that also says, though, it's day one and the U.S. won't have a lot of time to sort of figure out who's handling their quadruple taper well and who is not handling their quadruple taper well. So that is something that works against them.
I think if we can lead off in a 53 mid and have 352s, I think we win it. I think.
Yeah,
again,
but that's a big if.
It is a big if, but I think Claire is going to freaking blow it up. I think Tori coming off the Olympics is going to have a good year. And I think our veterans can continue being solid enough legs to where I'm praying.
Well, you've sounded more like a fan today than an analyst. So I'm going to say that.
I do think I'm, half of it's praying.
But you don't think Australia can match
last year.
You don't think Australia can match 53 mid and 352s?
I do think they can.
With Malio Callaghan and
they've faltered in that before. It's like we saw them falter in the 4x2 last summer. Again, in 2017, coming off of that huge world title, Olympic title, they didn't have the juice.
Yeah. Their question is going to be whether one of those young swimmers is ready to sort of step into the spotlight on that relay without the veterans there. Because I have confidence that Malio Callaghan can go 52 low, Meg Harris can go 52 mid or low. If they're they know they have those veterans around them. The question is, can one of them or both of them, for that matter, do it as the number one top of the heap swimmer?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So those are our previews. Stay tuned to SwimSwam for full 2022 U.S. World Champ Trials coverage, and we will see you in Greensboro.